What is the oldest item you own? How old is it and how did you acquire it? Ancient. I have a collection of trilobite fossils. One of them is at least 260 million years old. Modern. I wear a ring that belonged to a relative in the 1850s. I have reason to believe it was made in 1853. Passed to a grandparent in 1910. And to me in 1971. I have a rock that I use as a doorstop. It's a few 100 million years old at least. My stimulus check, about 3 days old at this point. I'm pretty proud. A Civil War era muzzle-loader rifle. It's genuinely a beautiful piece. And I still need to hang it on my wall. It can't fire, but it could still be used to bludgeon a man to death as home defense. It was passed down to me from a great uncle a few years back. I have a table that was carved out of a several hundred-year-old oak tree that is 200 years old. Edit. I acquired it from my parents, who acquired it from my grandmother, who acquired it from her mother, etc. I still have my mom's Nokia phone thingy. Drop it. Just did greater than. The concrete broke. Less than. It's too powerful to stay alive. A messenger bag. It used to be a backpack, but it is a rectangle. My aunt ordered the box set of the Amelia's notebooks and it came with a free bag. I loved those books at the time, but she didn't let me read them, but she gave me the bag. I wore it for so long that the straps ripped off. In high school I tied a scarf on the metal loops that used to hold the straps. And now it's a messenger bag. And I still use it. I know that compared to other answers that's nothing. But this bag has been the only thing to survive more moves than I bother to count. Even when I have lost everything I own, this bag makes it back to me. My wedding ring has a band of meteoric iron in it. That iron predates the formation of the Earth. But if you want to go for man-made items, I have an altar kit box, communion dishes, altar cloth, censer, holy water bottle, etc. from the 1700s. I have a bronze Roman ring circa 2nd century. Bought it from an antique dealer years ago. My house. It's 60 years old. I bought it. I can only assume that the downvote is by someone who can't afford a home. I like old houses. Often it's just beautiful, but sometimes you hear about hidden doors to hidden safety places. Enjoy your deserved freedom, my friend. 107-year-old 1911 pistol. 5-digit serial number puts its production in 1913. It was my grandfather's. My grandfather gave me his old coin collection before he passed away. The oldest coin in there is an old 1859 penny, which is incredibly worn. I also have an 1887 silver dollar in there, which is in far better shape. Before you ask, they aren't worth a lot, even if I wanted to sell them. I've checked. A Mewtwo plush, but the tag says Raichu instead of Mewtwo. My aunt, when she gave it to me, told me that it was made back in the late 90s. She told me to keep it and make a profit of it when I sell it in the future. A shirt I bought 50 years ago. It still fits me, just if I breathe in. I have 1880s Morgan silver dollar. That's probably the oldest object I own. The oldest thing is certainly a nice trilobite fossil. Found it on a trip to a fossil bed when I was a kid. For something more modern, I have a Nazi hat from WW2. It's sort of like one of those classic safari hats in style with the badges and such still on it. My grandfather must have brought it back with him. We're American and he was in the war. But unfortunately I don't know much about it. He never talked about the war. And no one knew it existed until we found it in an old hat box after he passed. I also have the razor they gave him when he shipped out. It was in the box with the hat and a note saying that's what it was. I have my great-grandfather's Hungarian Bible from 1903. And a Swiss Schmidt-Rubin 1896 rifle built in 1900. Our house was built in the 1850s. It's been renovated a few times, but the hearth is the one that the house was built around. Cherry wood dresser from the mid-late 1800s. Oops, forgot sterling silver serving spoon from the late 1700s. In 1833, half dime. Got it at a coin show. So, a nickel. I'm confused. This was before they were made of nickel, that's why they are called nickels. This is made of silver. Man-made, a coin from 1200 AD. I got it at a coin store for 15 bucks. Are they normally that cheap? I feel like they would be way more expensive than 15 bucks, but I'm not a coin person, so I DK. Neither am I really a coin person. I bought it when I was a kid a good 20 years ago. Inflation isn't that steep from back then, but I'd imagine it equates to a purchase price of around $25 worth in terms of today's money. From what I gather about coins, they're typically appraised for worth based on age, content, rarity, and most importantly condition, probably in that order too. My coin is heavily corroded, almost black, and is very difficult to make out discernible features. You can see a cross on it, and some other small features. I bought it mostly because I thought it was really cool to have a coin from the early Middle Ages. And also because it was one I could afford. The way it looked didn't really matter to me. I am guessing for it to have been so cheap it's probably not too uncommon to find. And because of its condition, it's essentially worthless. Guys at our coins might be able to identify with a good pic of the front and back. Worth a shot. Take a look at the website Bcoins. I bought a Roman Republic coin for $50, though it's in not great shape. A voodoo doll from 1956. I've got you all beat. I own a slice of a meteorite that fell in Murchison, Australia. Scientists have found particles in that meteorite that are 7 billion years old. To put that in perspective, our solar system is only about 4.5 billion years old. The oldest item I own is a book of the complete works of Henry Longfellow the poet. It was printed on 1776 and I took ownership of it and many other wonderful books after my sweet grandmother passed away in 1996. My vintage Sansui amp and speakers from the early 70s. Got it from my dad a few years ago, was helping them clean out their basement and spotted it in. Asked if it still worked, he said it did, and sure enough it did. Even the original bulbs were working. Had to get the speakers refoamed, but it sounds awesome and is set up in my game room now. Good stuff. I have an old Marantz in my closet. I'm not sure where it came from, monsieur. Gotta pull it out one day and test it. There's a big following for them online, it's pretty crazy but cool. A lot of people swap out the bulbs for LEDs and they look badass when done right. Be sure to test it out. My best friend, Rip J, was an audiophile. We're talking tube systems, incredible times listening to music, drinking wine and smoking doobies when I visited him back in the day. Of course, your taste in music had to be there. Same here for the speakers. But my dad got them in Japan in the 70s and shipped them over. 10 years ago, I found another matching set in a second-hand store and bought them, monsieur. I don't use any of them, sadly, but they have a lot of nostalgia for me, so I keep them, monsieur. I've got a Polish Bible from sometime in the mid-1800s. I'm pretty it's from when my family came off the boat back then, but it is in pretty bad condition. It's bound in leather, but the leather is so deteriorated at this point it looks more like the Necronomicon than a Bible. The oldest item in my home is a watch. Sorry, the watch. It belonged to my great-grandfather, who passed it on to my grandfather and then to my dad, and eventually will be passed on to me. How old is it? Let's see. It was gifted to my great-grandfather when he was 20-something by his father. He lived 75 years, making the watch 55 years older. My grandfather died just a year ago, aged 87 years. He was maybe 50 or so when his father died, so he had it for 37 years, making the watch 92 years old. And so, my dad is having it since a year. So finally, as of today it is 93 years old. Of course, after going through many damages and repairs, many ups and downs of my family's life, it has been always there in all sorts of sorrows and happiness. All the good times and bad times. and I seriously hope it almost never gets passed on to me. At least not in next 100 years. You see this watch? My grandfather, on his deathbed, sold me this watch. Woody Allen. When we bought our house we found an ice pick that says phone 183. I don't know how old it is, but a 3-digit phone number has got to be pretty old. 1 to 3-digit phone numbers began in 1892-1893. 4-digit numbers first appeared in 1905. Man-made. Probably a few coins originating from the Roman Empire. Natural. A fossilized shark tooth. My grandpa gave me a tomahawk from the Sioux Nation. I can't remember how old he said it was, but 400 years comes to mind. A fossil of a horsetail. Found it on a hike. Pencil case I still use from 10 years ago. Better yet, my atoms are billions of years old. Some of them are even as old as the whole universe. I probably have stuff older than this, but the most interesting is a King Tut pinball machine by Bally from 1969. It was bought new and kept inside in my grandparents' house since my dad was a kid. Still works fine. All original wiring, glass, artwork, everything. Only thing replaced are wear items like bulbs and rubber bands. A table from a resident in a dementia ward. Hard to say how old it is. She said her father made it in the 40s, but her memory wasn't the best. When her family moved her from independent living to the dementia ward, they moved her bed and her clothes. Nothing else, and told us to throw out everything else. It seemed a shame to let such a well-made table be reduced to trash. My parents grew up poor in rural China, so we don't have many heirlooms or anything. I think only 2 things were successfully passed down. A spoon that's around 50 years old now, which was special because that was literally the only metal spoon my dad's family owned, and one of the only things he brought over with him to America. A small book that has the names of around 7 generations of the people from my dad's side. My dad somehow lost the book, so now we only have the spoon, lol. My house. I bought it. Not really interesting or funny, but it was built in 1905 and is the oldest building in town. I have a USMC Sabre from World War I. It's about 104 years old. Also, the receiver my Fin M39 rifle is built on comes from a 1914 Ishevsk M91 Mosin Nagant, a Russian human anatomy textbook from 1873. It was stolen by a semi-distant relative and has been passed down ever since. It still is very interesting to look through. I have a coin from when some colonists pulled up to SC. Found it in the dirt and did some research. Afterwards I verified it for authenticity and it checked out. Christmas tree ornaments from when I was a baby, young child, including one with my, now deceased, dad's handwriting on it. It's a mint condition 1953 penny I got from a gas station while I was buying I think like 18 bangs before this quarantine went down. Not that old, but have a German WW2 bayonet I found in a car I bought under the seat. It's the best thing I found in a car. Second best was a Laura Branigan cassette I found 30 years ago. That lady had some great pipes. A textbook from the 1860s. It's titled Natural Philosophy and is about science. Of course it talks about things that the ether, but hey, that was the current theory. My grandpa's 36 feet yacht, about 30 to 40 years old. Suede jacket inherited from grandma. It's in GTRST condition and at least 50 years old. I have the badge that came with my first birthday card from my dad, so 37 years old. Great-grandmother died. I found this old suitcase, it's hers. It's about 100 years old. I have a first edition Mechanical Engineer's Handbook printed in 1916. I acquired it after finding it in my desk at an internship I had. I'm an engineer, so I kept it. We have a piano from the 1890s. And we have my great-great-grandfather's police saber from when he was chief of police in Brussels. From 1880 to 1915. Family heirlooms. Although I suspect the piano is going to one of my older brothers. and the sword is in the possession of my oldest brother. Me personally, besides some rocks, the oldest thing I know its date of is a stuffed animal from when I was born. Was your great-grandfather perhaps Hercule Poirot? He was not. That would be pretty awesome though. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.